Hello and welcome to the third in the series of Collectively Speaking, a new podcast series where we talk about the big issues in the built environment. My name is Max Farrell. I'm the founder and chief exec of the LDN Collective, and this series is conversations with different members of the LDN Collective. The LDN Collective is a group of specialists who are driven by environmental and social values. We collaborate together in a bottom-up way, and I think the fascinating thing about this group is that all the different voices and the different perspectives, and the fact that when we come together, that's when the magic happens. So I'm really pleased to be giving a platform to our members to talk about the topics that are important to them and for you to get to know them a bit better. Today we are talking to Ed Watson. Ed is an old friend and founding member of the LDN Collective. I got to know him when he was working in local authority planning and cultural development teams, including at London Borough of Camden and Westminster City Council, when he worked on some really significant and groundbreaking projects like King's Cross. And Ed is one of those people that has made the transition very successfully from public to private sector, working for a while at Arup as a specialist consultant and advisor on public-private partnerships, and more recently as the chief executive of the Birmingham Local Enterprise Partnership. Ed has also been involved in a number of our projects and thought leadership initiatives, and he's a non-exec director of Boon Brown, one of the architects within the LDN Collective.
So Ed, brilliant to be here with you today. What would be interesting to talk to you about is, and I've always felt this right from the working with you through the collective, but even beforehand, is you have this unique perspective of somebody that works in the public sector, in local authorities, Camden and Westminster in particular, and then left and worked in the private sector. And I know you worked for organisations like Arup, but also in your own right as somebody with a portfolio of doing different interesting things. So can you tell us a bit about your journey and what you've done up until now, and also what the plans are for the future?
Yeah, thanks, Max. As I said, it's great to be here and great to have an opportunity to be part of this LDN Collective podcast series. My background is as a planner. I studied town planning at Polytechnic back in the day, and then I started a nearly 30-year career in local government at Hammersmith and Fulham, and over the following kind of 20-odd years I worked my way up through local government until I was at corporate director level. And as you say, particularly at Camden and Westminster, I probably had my most kind of fruitful times in terms of trying to make change. And I guess the one thing I took as I went on that journey through local government was that in order to deliver the sort of change that I thought was important, like place-based approach, thinking about outcomes rather than process, you had to get to a certain level of seniority in order to have that influence and provide leadership to teams and work in effective partnership with politicians to get stuff done. So I worked pretty hard to get into those kind of positions of seniority where I could have that influence, and had a really good time working at Camden in particular for 9 years, from 2009 when we had to think about the future of King's Cross, get involved in that, get involved in our own housing delivery programme and our own capital programme, and then think about how opportunities like the Francis Crick Institute might change the face of that area. So it's been a really, really interesting journey.
Good. I think one thing I've noticed that's changed, although probably not changed enough, but certainly a direction of travel, is that there used to be this very sort of almost adversarial relationship between the private sector and the public sector, and it was a sort of poacher versus gamekeeper type relationship. With some of the projects and initiatives you talked about in Camden and King's Cross and so on, have very much come about through partnership work. And as we all know, partnerships, when people are very different or have different mindsets and different drivers, aren't easy. What would be your sort of advice to either private sector developer that's looking to have a better partnership working with the public sector, or the reverse, the public sector that's looking to bring in the right type of private sector partners and work with them in a more constructive and collegiate way?
I think you've kind of alluded to the answer, which is to think about things from the other person's perspective. So one of the mistakes I think that private sector quite often makes is to think of its schemes and its developments, however, brilliantly architects and planners have thought them through. They think of them from their own kind of profit perspective at times, and not necessarily thinking about them from either a language or an outcomes perspective that the public sector might want. And similarly, I think it's easy for the public sector to feel that private sector is just in it for the money, and actually, in order for there to be an effective partnership, everyone needs to say, well, what do we both get out of this? And that's sometimes accepting that you need to think differently about how you talk about your proposal. How does it impact and benefit communities, either in terms of homes or jobs or sustainability or permeability, public realm, whatever. And how does your local authority think about, well, if I work in partnership with these people, I can really deliver benefits for my communities?
It is the hardest part, about having that empathy, isn't it? And putting yourself in the other person's shoes.
Yeah, definitely. And I think in some places, if you start early enough with a blank enough sheet of paper, and you have fairly kind of honest and frank conversations about what everyone's trying to achieve and how you might go on the journey together, and you've got a much better chance of having both a kind of a successful partnership, but also, most importantly, successful outcomes at the end of the process. The idea of people squirreling away some secret plans and then suddenly landing them on the local authority's desk to say, oh, we're submitting this the day before Christmas, and we'll want our decision in next week's time. Hopefully those days are gone now.
Although what has been more of a trend in recent times is that planning departments have become even more strained in terms of their resources and the time they can commit to this partnership working in collaborations. What's the solution to that in the medium to long term, other than better funding for planning departments?
I think in the medium to long term, there's something about the numbers of planners in the system, and there was a trend for planning to be described as, not very interesting job, very processy, and people weren't kind of encouraged to be part of it. But when you start to talk about the profession from the perspective of outcomes, of placemaking, of partnership, of changing people's lives, then it becomes a more powerful and more interesting profession, and hopefully more attractive, therefore, for planning schools to attract graduates. My sense is that picture's improving, but in terms of how you then get those graduates into local authorities and get them to stay, yes, it would be great if people had unlimited funding in local authorities, but the mechanism most councils are using these days is planning performance agreements, where developers who know they need a certain amount of resource for a long amount of time are willing to fund some additional resource into the local authority in order to help move the process forward.
So there are ways and means to make sure that these things do go well ultimately.
Yeah, I think so. There's still not enough resource overall, and it's worth saying the planning system has become, to me, unrecognisably complex over the last 25 to 30 years. When I see what the planning officers are required to do on some of these big and complicated regeneration schemes compared to what I was doing when I was a young planner, they just don't compare. And take my hat off to both public and private sector planners for their ability to navigate through this kind of ever increasingly complex world, and then obviously you've got members of planning committees at the kind of the sharp end of that, having to make a decision on this very, very complex array of information.
But I suppose if you are all about outcomes, then if the process is complex for a reason, and ultimately the proof is in the pudding that these things do come out as having quality outcomes.
Yeah, I like to think so. If you've got the right resource and the right mindset, then you will get to, hopefully, good outcomes from the process. I just think sometimes people can get lost in the process and not see the wood for the trees.
I'd like to ask you a bit about a couple of other initiatives or companies that you're involved in, one of which you introduced me to, Boon Brown, an architectural practice. So I'm very grateful for you for doing that, because they've been a great asset to the LDN Collective, bringing something a bit different and also being very inherently collaborative. And I think maybe that comes out of them having done either their own conceptual designs or delivered concept designs by other practices. So it's almost like part of their business model is to have to collaborate. So can you tell me a bit about that and what got you into that and what you see for them moving forwards?
Yeah, definitely. I suppose the first thing to say is, as part of my own consultancy, I do a kind of range of things. And one of the things I do is act as a non-exec director for Boon Brown. They're a great practice. They have a home base in Yeovil in the West Country, but they have a small studio in London. And acting as a non-exec director for them, particularly with a focus on supporting the London team, I'm able to help them meet interesting and productive and thoughtful people in the London development community, such as the LDN Collective, but also provide a bit of leadership and management expertise into the organisation in order to help them move on. And as you say, one of the things that I think they are good at, but we're trying to get better at, is partnership working and seeing how we, through our activities, both our day-to-day architectural activities and through our relationships with our communities, can be good partners, both through a contractual relationship, but also in the place in which we operate. And they have architecture, planning and landscape. So one of the things they bring to their own kind of business, as it were, is thinking about how, as a business, they operate effectively in partnership with landscape-led design and a place-based approach to how they think about particularly mixed-use developments. So it's great. And I think the other thing I would say is, as you probably heard earlier today, there are many architecture practices in London, and it's a bit of a battle both for clients and for staff. And so they've got a young and diverse workforce, and it's great to help grow those individuals as part of a team and part of a philosophy which is about effective partnership working and delivering good outcomes.
So, Ed, I think it's almost becoming a theme from this conversation to me that your strength really lies in partnerships and understanding how to make them work and also the benefits. So if you were to say, what are the three things that are essential for good partnership working, do you think you could give us that magic formula?
Yeah, I don't know whether I can get to three, but certainly I think there's something about shared ambitions and a kind of an agreed objective that everyone's working to. There's a kind of leave your egos at the door, we're all in this together type piece. And I guess thirdly, there's something about being able to therefore give and receive effective feedback as part of that partnership. So, everyone feels like they are an equal partner in the conversation and everyone's contribution is equally valid. And the thing that I've noticed particularly about the LDN Collective since I've been working with you over the last few years is that a lot of the projects that you do are very much on the kind of innovation and trying to solve sticky problems side of things, and that in order to do that, partnership working is a really key and essential part of it. And one of the projects that I know that you and I have just been involved in at a kind of inception stage at the moment is the Homes for Homelessness piece of work, which is about saying, how can we solve, or at least partly solve, one of the complexities of the issue around how people who are without a home at the moment could access a relatively cheap and affordable home across London, making use of some funding that government has put out there by bringing together the kind of construction side of things. You might want to say people particularly using modern methods of construction alongside the planning and architecture and place profession, and think about how we can then go and talk to registered providers, social housing providers and councils to say, well, we have a proposition here that could help you with this particular problem. How can we go forward together?
Excellent, thanks, Ed. And that for me is such an important project because it's often the hardest problems that don't end up getting tackled because they are so hard, and but equally they have the biggest potential impacts. And I think people underestimate how much that value that can be created by giving these people a way back into society, and the current sort of cost of people being on the streets, and whether that's for the NHS or policing or mental health. If we can find very simple solutions, but all come together to do that and do it in a way that's not for profit, which I think is the key to this as well. We're going to set up a new not-for-profit vehicle, then that can only be a good thing. But again, it's about bringing together all the different partners to all move in the right direction together, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. And I think there's something about the difficult problems have remained unsolved because people have tended to think about things in the same way, and so sometimes you need to bring fresh thinking to the table in order to unlock things. And the LDN Collective is in of itself a piece of fresh thinking. Like, how can we do development consultancy, let's call it, in a different way? How can we bring people with different skill sets together in order to help solve problems and deliver good outcomes for places? And thinking differently is leading to this sort of solution, like the Home for Homelessness piece.
Good stuff. So Ed, just to sort of round things off then, it's been a brilliant discussion. Where do you see yourself going in the next few years, and what's next for Ed Watson?
Kind of more of the same, I suppose, in principle, like continuing to work with interesting people on good projects, and sometimes innovative projects that don't yet have a proper kind of home, as it were, and a little bit of, you might call it, lost leader, in order to help get things off the ground that otherwise might not be successful. My kind of three specialist subjects, I suppose, in my consultancy are town centres and high streets, more recently biomedical campuses and the whole kind of life sciences piece, and then the kind of wider place shaping agenda. And so I'll kind of hope to do a bit more of that. I've just started a piece of work up in Cambridge which combines the biomedical life sciences piece with placemaking approach, which is really, really interesting. Yeah. So, whether I'll have more things up in that kind of Oxford, Cambridge, Arc area and life sciences piece, I don't know. Yeah, continuing to do interesting things and help clients realise value in a way that perhaps they didn't think they were able to previously.
Thank you, Ed. And that's been a fascinating journey to go on, talking about your career and your involvement with the LDN Collective. It's so important to have different perspectives involved in these types of networks and membership organisations, and the public sector voice and how the relationships work between public and private, but also the collaborations between different types of consultants is absolutely key, in my opinion. And it's great to have Ed Watson there as somebody who has a lot of experience in this particular area.